Hello, Guitar Smarts fans. Before you check out this podcast, I want to make you aware of a cool new place where you can interact with other Guitar Smarts listeners. It's a Facebook group called the Guitar Geek Hangout. That's where we hang out and talk about all things guitar. So, if you like the Guitar Smarts podcast, come and chat with Kieran and myself over in the Guitar Geek Hangout on Facebook. Maybe check out some pre-podcast clips and even get involved in asking and answering lots of questions from the other page dwellers. Hope to see you there.
I remember when we did my first tour of South America. I remember especially Rio de Janeiro, and we played a few songs that I'd written in my living room, Derbyshire, and they're singing for a guitar riff back at me. I'm not going to lie, that was a moment where you go, don't cry on stage. It doesn't look very good.
Greetings, Merry Christmas, and welcome to the Guitar Smarts podcast. Thank you so much for downloading. It's been a fantastic year, fantastic first year of the podcast. We're going into the Christmas week now with probably our biggest show of the year, which is a fantastic interview with an excellent guitarist and an absolute gentleman by the name of Richard Shaw. Richard Shaw is one of the guitarists for the UK-based heavy metal band Cradle of Filth. He's been a member since 2014. He's toured the world numerous times with them, co-written and performed on the last three albums, Hammer of the Witches, Cryptoriana, The Seductiveness of Decay, and Existence is Futile, which has just recently come out to fantastic reviews. He's been a guitar educator since about 2006, teaching all over the place in music schools and in colleges and at university level. He's been conducting master classes at colleges and music schools throughout the UK. He's an incredibly accomplished session musician, and he's played at over 50 musical theatre productions, and if you've ever done any musical theatre stuff, you know that that's as serious as it gets. Not only that, but Richard joins us after just releasing his first ever educational book called Fretboard and Songwriting Theory for Metalheads and Other Genres Too, Using the Secret to Unlock the Fretboard and Your Songwriting Potential. It's been fantastic to have Richard on this episode. He's actually an old friend of mine. We were in the same class together at the Academy of Music many years ago in the early 2000s, and I've known Richard for a long time, and he hasn't changed a bit. Success hasn't changed him. He's still as hardworking and as enthusiastic as ever, and it was just an absolute pleasure to speak to him today. So I really hope you enjoy this fantastic interview with Richard Shaw. Come and follow the podcast on the social media pages. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Guitar Smarts, and you can find us on Instagram as well at guitar_smarts. We'd really love it if you could support the podcast. Maybe come and buy some merchandise from us on our Etsy merchandise store, or you can come and make a donation to the show via buymeacoffee.com, and the links for that are in the show description on your podcast app. You can also support the show by leaving us a rating and a review on your favourite podcast app. Anyway, finally, just one last thing, just Merry Christmas. This is coming out to you on the last week before Christmas, so we hope you have a fantastic Christmas, a wonderful weekend, and that's enough waffle from me. Let's get to it. Kieran, how are you doing, mate? Are you well?
Yeah, I'm really good, buddy. Good to catch up with you as always. Yeah, looking forward to today's show immensely, mate.
You had a busy week.
Yeah, just look, man. It's the run up to Christmas, isn't it? So work is getting busy, trying to cram in a few last minute bits and pieces that we're doing at work before Christmas, but at the same time, everyone's getting a little bit demob happy and feeling that Christmas thing coming along. And as we chatted last week, right, you told me last week that you had the decorations up, you were in the full Christmas spirit, and I was being a little bit of a kind of humbug. So I was like, mate, we're still in November. It's not ready yet. It's not right. And now we have tipped into December. So yes, mate, I'm all about the Christmas vibe now. So it's been a good week for that.
And How about you? Behind it. Yeah, I'm good. A busy week as well. I'm just checking behind you because you have a habit of sneaking new guitars into that room sometimes. Yeah. But it all looks like we're in order. But yeah, great. Really busy week. Really, really good one. I'm glad it's Friday, but super excited about this week's podcast because we're not alone this week. We've not had a guest for a little while, but we've got a guest and it's a bona fide rock star as well.
It is. It certainly is.
So we're joined this week by Cradle of Filth guitarist, Mr. Richard Shaw. Richard, how are you doing? You good?
I'm doing well, thank you, guys. How are you guys?
Yay.
Brilliant. Absolutely.
Really good.
Real pleasure to have you on the show this week, mate. And I should do a quick introduction. So, Richard Shaw, and I'm being honest, I'm stealing this from the pages of your new book that you've got out.
Oh God! Right, okay.
So, for those of you, for those of our listeners who don't know who Richard Shaw is, Richard is one of the guitarists for the UK-based heavy metal band Cradle of Filth. He's been a member in that band since 2014. He's toured the world numerous times, co-written and performed on the albums Hammer of the Witches, 2015, Cryptoriana, The Seductiveness of Decay, 2017, which is just one of the best album names I've heard for a long time.
Just ever.
Exactly. And the latest Cradle of Filth release as well, which is Existence is Futile. He's been working in guitar education since 2006, teaching at schools, colleges, universities, and conducting masterclasses at colleges throughout the UK. He's an accomplished session musician. He's played over 50 musical theatre productions, which is crazy because that's an entirely different beast, which we'll get onto later as well as performing as a hired gun in covers bands and tribute bands. So welcome to Guitar Smarts, Richard Shaw.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, no worries. And congratulations, by the way, on your new book. So you're finally a published author, aren't you? So tell us about that. Tell us about your new book.
Yeah, it's weird. You're the first person who's kind of acknowledged it as I'm a published author. And it was like, as weird as it sounds, I never really thought of it being that. It was just something I've wanted to do for well over a decade. I had a book idea because I hadn't seen anyone really put it into a book. And I was like, well, maybe one day I'll write it. Somebody will write it soon. If I ever find time, which I don't think I've had for a very long time. You don't get much free time doing what I do, but free time like doing music and now being a dad and, life gets in the way as it does for a lot of people.
Sure.
And then lockdown happened and I found myself with a lot of free time all of a sudden. It's like, well, I'm not going on tour. I'd literally just finished recording my guitar parts for the last Cradle of Filth album when lockdown happened. I was like, well, I can't really, because I was teaching. I was like, well, all my in-person lessons, I can't teach them. Still had some of my online lessons and then built up the online lessons. But at the same time, for about a good 2 or 3 week period, I was like, I have way too much free time. I can't go anywhere like the rest of the world. And then I just woke up and went, I'm going to start writing that book now. And that's what happened. And I think I did it the wrong way round because I wrote the book and then went, cool, I'm happy with it. I think I've done it. How do you publish a book? So the reason why it's taken a while, because I was like, okay, I've got the book finished by I think it was like January, February of this year, the book was finished. But then the rest of it was like researching how to publish it. And I had a lot of friends who work in guitar education and who have released books. And they say it in a weird way. It's kind of the same thing as being in a band. Like when you've got a band, you'll never get a record company to release your album until you've already proven you can sell albums on your own. By which point it's like, well, now I don't need a record company. It was kind of the same with the book, where it was like, okay, they all said the same thing. It's like, unfortunately, a publisher won't really take a chance on you on your first book.
Yeah.
So it was like, well, kind of have to publish it yourself. And then hopefully if it does okay, publishers will take you seriously. So I was like, okay. And then it became a lot of research into how to do that and how to get a cover design, how to get a barcode and an ISBN number. All these things I didn't necessarily think about. I was like, I'll write a book. I'll be an author. And it's like, oh no, now I've got to wear all these hats. I suppose it's the same when you start playing guitar. I don't know about you guys. When I first started playing guitar, it was like, I just want to jam with my mates. And then it turns into being a musician in this day and age. It's like, right now I need to be a songwriter, a producer, an engineer, all these hats you've got to wear, an accountant, all these things you don't necessarily think about when you first start playing guitar. It was kind of the same with writing the book. It was like, right, I'm going to write the book. And then once I went down that rabbit hole, it was like, oh, right, there's actually quite a lot I need to learn how to do. And it finally happened, and I published it this Wednesday just gone, December 1st.
Wow. Brilliant. Congratulations, man. I mean,
thank you very much.
It's great. I mean, I'm going to buy it myself because I'm interested in the subject matter as well. But it's called, for those listening, it's called Fretboard and Songwriting Theory for Metalheads and Other Genres Too, using the secret to unlock the fretboard and your songwriting potential. The secret. How tantalizing.
It is.
Oh, that's a proper clickbait title, that is, isn't it?
Properly.
If I had a YouTube channel, that would be the one I'd go with for the clicks.
Yeah. See, if going back to kind of my childhood here, going into music shops, because when I grew up, and I'm sure it's the same for you guys, music shops always had that kind of tab section, where you could go through tab books and things before the internet. And that would be the kind of thing where I'd pick up and go, right, what's the secret? I'd start scanning through the whole thing. What does he say the secret is? And I'm not going to ask you to tell us what the secret is, but I'm just going to say, if you want, what are you trying to kind of, what's the main message you're trying to convey in this book? Are you trying to help people to understand things differently, or just share your own knowledge?
It's an accumulation of everything I've kind of learned over my teaching career. There was a lot of questions that I should say this, the book is more for intermediate to advanced players, not necessarily for beginners, but a lot of intermediate to advanced players come to me, kind of almost felt like they were stuck in a rut. It's almost like they'd learned all these scale shapes, and then all of a sudden you say, right, let's do it in a different key. It's like, oh, now I've got to start all over again.
Yeah.
But even like with the minor pentatonic, it was like, okay, we're going to do it in a different key. Take a solo. Okay, I'll start at shape 1. And I might branch out of it.
Yeah.
So, and it was something that I kind of learned, weirdly enough, at ACM, but it wasn't taught at ACM, where it was like this whole approach to seeing the fretboard where you don't use scale shapes at all. So when I play guitar, I don't use scale shapes at all.
So are you thinking intervallically then?
Everything's intervallically, yeah. So scale shapes basically go out the window.
Yeah.
And it's knowing what those notes, not only where they're located on the neck, so you can effortlessly go between them within different keys, different scales. So if you learn a brand new scale, you're not like, oh my God, I've got a million shapes I need to learn for this scale. It's kind of like, no, you've got framework, you've got the concept, now apply that to the entire neck like that.
Yeah.
And that's what I found for me was a game changer in my playing and how I viewed the fretboard.
Yeah.
And in a weird way, that opened up a lot of creativity because I wasn't tied into the scale shapes that I'd known and loved. It was like, oh, now I can break out of it relatively easily. And it sounds more musical than just going for kind of like the set licks that your fingers naturally fall on when you play in certain shapes.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so it was just one of those things where I felt quite strongly about it. And I'd shown this to quite a few of my students. And within 10 or 15 minutes, they were just literally playing all over the neck.
Wow.
Which they'd never done before. Yes, you pick up the concept relatively quickly, but obviously, as we know, it's that daily application of going, let me get more and more comfortable with this.
Yeah. That's a good point. I mean, that's something that's, I think, has come to my playing only this year, even after all this time, which is that thought process of thinking of things and about their musical function rather than just the shapes, because we're guilty as guitarists. We learn things in very physical and shape formats, scale shapes and things, and especially chord shapes and stuff. And, I only came to the realization this year that when you think about like the major scale modes, for example, it's the semitones. It's the notes that are a semitone apart from each other that really define the scale. When you think about the major scale, it's that major seventh and the major third to major fourth that define it. And you think about the Lydian scale, it's the semitone between the sharp fourth and the fifth, and then the major seventh and the. So it's always, you can look at, if you know the major scale, the thing that defines the sound of the modes is where those two semitones. So you start thinking intervallically, and it really does change your approach to playing. You can then think where you are on the neck and change where you go depending on what interval you want to express. And all of a sudden, you're not thinking of a shape anymore. And you're not.
Exactly.
Because when you think of shapes, you tend to move in very linear ways as well, rather than thinking. So that's a really key thing. So I think this book is going to be really key and like you say, for other genres too, not just metalheads. If you're a guitarist that is in that rut and you want to break out, I think this book's going to really, really help. So
thank you. Yeah, it was one of those things where I started talking about this concept, the secret, because it's amazing how many professional musicians I met that knew of this approach.
Yeah.
But nobody was talking about it. It's like, why do we still talk in terms of scale shapes and chord shapes? Why is nobody talking about this? And why? why does it have to be this closely guarded secret? And I've never understood why. Even my guitar teachers, one of my guitar teachers at ACM, was talking about this concept. And I was like, why aren't we taught this from day one? And it's almost like, well, you have to understand the shapes and their relation to each other, and basically go the hard way round, the long way round, to appreciate the easy way.
So do you agree with that?
To a certain extent. I was kind of frustrated that I knew all these scales, I knew all these chords, yet all of a sudden we'd go, right, now let's do it in the key of B major. And you're like, oh, I know it in C major really well. Now why have you done that? Now I've got to like almost go back to ground zero to think about all those shapes and the relationship to each other. Whereas with this concept, I found like I didn't need to go back to ground zero because it's actually a relatively simple thing when you understand it. It's a relatively simple thing, but like I say, the application of it takes a while, and obviously daily practice like anything else.
I'm properly excited by that.
So I think there's a place for scale shapes and like technique practice, and it's almost like guitar players learn, right, here's a scale shape, because then you know what the right notes are, instead of going, well, now your fingers are being dictated by set patterns. Whereas when I started with this, using this approach, it was almost like the musicality and the creative side of my brain and my ear kind of fused together. It's like, well, where do I want this to go, more than being defined of where does the scale shape dictate I'm going to go next. Like we've all done it where it's like it is like, and don't get me wrong, we've all gone through it and we all should go through it to develop that technique, but there comes a point where it's like, well, that's not really musical anymore. That's for shape dictating what I'm going to do. Instead of my imagination and my ear wants me to go. Now, where do I find that on the guitar instead of doing it the other way around?
I can
really relate to that.
Sorry, go on, Kieran.
I was going to say, I can just really relate to that. I think, and that's why I kind of asked the question around, as you described what your kind of guitar teacher had said before, is, we want you to go through the pain of learning this by rote, and then you'll kind of get this secret, as it were, later down the line. And you did say, that at the beginning, this is more for the intermediate player. So I guess there is a level of foundational work and graft that you need to put in. But I just the way you describe that, because I haven't been to ACM like you guys. I'm a kind of self-taught guitarist, so I'm very much in that kind of relationship with my playing and music in general, which is like using my ear a lot to understand the intervals and how to find the tones that I want on the neck based on where I am, and then my own kind of ear training to get the sounds that I want, but then trying to also relate it to scale shapes. And there's that clash between the two of them where they don't quite knit together and make sense yet. If someone says to me, just play from your gut and from your soul, and just let your fingers and head just go where the notes are because of where you are and your knowledge of the fretboard, great, I can do that. And if someone says, well, play to me this scale, then I go into that, right, ground zero, let's build it up and start again. But what you're kind of describing is a way to interlink those two things, I guess, in a way that just makes people feel more comfortable and takes their playing in a different direction. So I'm excited listening to what you're describing, because I think for a lot of players out there, that rut you describe is a very real frustration. And when I speak to Matt about it, as we have done many times on the podcast, right, and you've explained to me and tried to teach me elements of this, I kind of get little bits of it here and there, but it's still that constant conflict of, right, what scale shape do I learn here versus just what feels right to me. So yeah, really, really exciting.
It's that constant battle I find with a lot of my students where it's like, well, I like this sound, but how do you find that sound? They're naturally wanting to break out from what we know. And I think a lot of musicians do. You just get to that point where it's like, this can't be it. Like what I've learned so far, and I've learned all these scales, and this cannot be it, and I've just got to repeat this until my playing career is over, until I decide to quit, or whatever you want to do. It can't be it, and it's not. It's finding the sound in your head first. But this is why I talk about theory, the songwriting theory side of things. It's like, yes, this is the first half of the book, is like finding these things. It's like, now you get that concept. Here are some different ideas and some different scales, and maybe here are the chords we can use with those scales. And I kind of, when I'm writing, I do write from the gut and what sounds good. But there comes, especially in Cradle of Filth, there's always this little something that happens. Whereas I've written this chord progression, I'm like, this just sounds good to me. I don't even know what key I'm in right now. I'm just going with what feels right. And our singer is a bugger for this because he always chooses those parts where he's like, maybe you want to do a guitar solo over that. And you're like, right, now I've got to really think about what the hell I'm doing. Like what, and that's where the second half of the book going, right, okay, now that you know where you're going on a fretboard, found these wonderful new things. How can we, if you get stuck in a rut when writing a song, you're like, no, don't know what to do. Here's a little theoretical device that I use to kind of unlock the door. There might be a sound I want to hear in my head. Well, there's a theoretical explanation and there's a theoretical device that will basically be the key to unlock the door to the sound you hear in your head. So I still say this in my book, and I say it to all my students, just because you know the theory doesn't mean you're a great player. It's the application of that theory. I use theory as like a get out clause. It's like, right, okay, I've hit a brick wall, but I know the sound I hear in my head. Let's just go back into that, like into my brain and go through the filing cabinet. That's the thing I need.
That's why. That's
why. Cool. Now I've found this new device. That means I can go, now I've written a bridge. Instead of taking 2 days to find what I want, it now takes me 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's a really important point, isn't it? Because that's where the frustration comes in, as when you get to that intermediate kind of level where, as you said, you know there's more, you can't quite grasp it. And because your playing has reached a certain level already, and, you know, you kind of get frustrated that it's not happening as quickly as you want it to. And then you end up giving up, or some players end up giving up because they go, I'll just fall back on what I know.
Exactly.
Because it's too difficult. It's taking too much more time, and I'm frustrated because I feel like I'm a guitar player already. So that speeding up that process is a wonderful thing to be able to try.
But it's that whole thing of, I can't remember. There's like the 4 stages. I read all these hippie trippy books, but all these like the 4 stages of knowledge or whatever. And it's like, what is it? Like there's the first stage where it's like, you don't know that you don't know it.
Unconsciously incompetent.
Unconsciously incompetent, then consciously incompetent. Then you go into, basically this is the thing, and it's exactly the same thing that happens through any skill that anybody learns. Matt, I don't know if it was the same for you, but when I went to ACM, because I almost got to that point where it's like, right, I know how little I know on the guitar. When I was kind of a lot younger player, and you're like, I'm a hot shot player,
I'm the best guitarist in the world.
I'm like 14 years old. I've learned the minor pentatonic. Like, let's see how fast my fingers can fly. And then literally, I remember discovering how little I knew. Bear in mind, I was doing my A-levels and I did like Steve Vai songs. And then I was like, well, I need to take this to the next level. I was playing Steve Vai songs like note for note perfect. I didn't have a clue what I was doing, but I was literally just learning it parrot fashion from the tab and then listening to the record to go, well, there's the rhythm. I've just got to try and play as fast as that after God knows how much practice. But when I got my ACM audition form, I don't know if you remember this, Matt, it said like on the tape, this was tape, ladies and gentlemen. Back in 2003, when I had to borrow my school's Tascam 4-track to do my ACM audition. And I had to figure out how to work that in the same way I had to figure out how to use Logic today. And I'm there going, right, I think I pressed play and record at the same time. And then like number 1 was like, play the G minor pentatonic scale, I think it was. And I was like, piece of piss, no problem. I've got a definite place on the degree. And then I was surprised. When I didn't get on the degree. I know it sounds, I didn't get on the degree course. I got on the higher diploma course.
Yeah. Right.
So I didn't go on the diploma, but I went straight into the high diploma. And I remember asking them, going, well, just out of curiosity, why didn't I get on the degree? Because I fulfilled all the criteria. And they said, well, you only played one shape of the G minor pentatonic scale. And I went, there's more than one shape. And it was just that thing. And it was that noticing that part in my career where it's like, I didn't know there was more than that, but now I know there is. I've not even scratched the surface.
Well, even Kieran and I know, Rich, that there's another one that an octave.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. I think that was what I was thinking. The minor pentatonic scale in two positions, at least two positions. And I was like, right, I'll play it from the 3rd fret and the 15th fret. I've got this nailed. I know exactly what I'm doing. And it
strutting down to the pulse box with your team.
Yeah, exactly. Here we go. I've got this in the bag, you know. And it was one of those things where I didn't realise how little I knew.
So sorry to interrupt this fantastic interview with Richard Shaw, but if you're enjoying this podcast, maybe you should subscribe to the show so that you never miss another episode. Pause it here, go away and subscribe, and then come back to the show. Let's get to it.
I think we all naturally do this. And for me, almost writing this book was that next step of that, of going, when I became aware of this concept, everything opened up for me.
Yeah.
And the theory side, I naturally went down the theory route because one, I was genuinely interested in it. And I think at ACM, it helped that I had teachers who you could tell they were passionate about theory and could communicate it in a way that I hadn't heard theory before. Like theory to me was a very intimidating word and a very intimidating concept. And when you're taught it by someone who you could tell is passionate about it and can articulate it in a very relatable way. I don't know about you guys. I mean, I did A-level music and all the theory was like keyboard based. You read the theory in a textbook and it always related everything to the piano. And I was there going, well, how does this relate to my instrument?
Yeah.
Yes, I know a C major scale, but I couldn't play it on the guitar because all the textbooks just went, well, it's C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Brilliant. Yeah. Where's that on the guitar? To me, theory was kind of pointless. I'd learned it, but I didn't know how to relate it to the instrument. Yeah. So that's what I've tried to do in this book, is try to break that down, that you can move away from scale shapes. And so picking up that concept. And then the next idea is going, okay, how can we expand on that? So we now have more sounds at our disposal. How do I get that sound? How did the Beatles get that amazing change in the bridge of We Can Work It Out? That's where you get into all this modal interchange stuff and all this stuff, kind of natural curiosity of how do I write better songs like my heroes? Why are they using that chord? How can I do that? And that's kind of how I inevitably came down the theory route.
Yes.
Because out of sheer curiosity it wasn't like learning theory going, well, I'm going to start at page 1 in the textbook and then end up at whatever page. Now I know theory. It was more of this kind of very organic, holistic thing of I'm just trying to emulate my favorite players.
Yeah.
Why does that work? Yeah. And that's kind of what I kind of talk about in this book.
It's that question why, isn't it? I mean, one of the things I like about, Rick Beato on YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things I love about his YouTube channel is he does those great videos where he's explaining that to you. He's kind of saying, this is why this works. This is why this is pleasing to the ear. And as much as kind of, my younger self would have said for a long time, I don't need to know theory to really, enjoy and love music. There does come, as you progress as a musician in any instrument, there will always come a point in time where a lack of understanding in theory is going to hold you back, especially if you're starting to hear things in your mind musically that you can't express. Because I guess there's a misalignment, isn't there? There's your physical ability as a guitarist. There's what you want to do and what you hear in your head. And when you want to have all those things in a line, don't you? But inevitably, as guitarists, we develop a physical ability ahead of our understanding. But then at some point, the things we hear in our mind musically go past our physical ability, and now everything is in a different place. And trying to bring those things back in a line is difficult because of the way we learn the instrument. So
I find it is almost like spinning plates. Like a lot of guitar players, once you get into it, like you pick it up for the purest of reasons. It's like, I just think I'll be the greatest guitar player if I learned how to play Wonderwall or whatever. You know what I mean? I think that's it. That's all I ever want to do. For me, it was, if I could ever play the solo in Bohemian Rhapsody, I think I'd be the greatest guitar player that ever lived. And then you finally learn how to play the solo in Bohemian Rhapsody, and you inevitably get on to the next step. And I love that it's an ongoing thing. I'll never be the greatest guitar player in the planet. but I'm having a lot of fun trying to be.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? Like trying to discover new things. And it's that curiosity and that love and that passion has never left since my first chord. You know, when I first learned a D chord, I was like, oh, my fingers hurt, but by God, I love the sound of it. You know what I mean? Like the first time I played a D chord and it didn't buzz, I was like, oh, I'm the greatest of ever. Like, it's just that confidence that came naturally.
Yeah.
And to me, the book that I've written which is literally, I'm pointing it to over here. Like, it's just amazing to actually hold it in my hands. It's the natural conclusion of just these years of curiosity, and just maybe I'll just condense it into a book form. You know,
it's just fantastic. I'm so pleased for you that you've been able to do it as well, and it sounds like it took quite some time this year for you to translate it from the work you'd done into a book. But congratulations, Rich!
Thank you. It was just one of those things where, as you know, life gets in the way. I'm a dad, and I teach. I'm obviously touring. I'm writing and recording. It's always one of those things I wanted to do, but it was like just life found a way to make it not happen.
Yeah.
And the reason it took so long, I mean, I was buying a house. We were like going on tour, trying to navigate our way around COVID, daily meetings about tours, because like, what are we going to do? And then it's stuff that pushes it back. And then thankfully, I just learned how to self-publish on Amazon as a way to self-publish it and work my way around all that software and all the criterion you need to meet and all this kind of stuff. So when I come to do another book, now that I know how to do it, like any skill, I suppose, once you know how to do it, next time's going to be even easier. You can relate that to any skill in life, you know? Just it's always that chipping away. I mean, I'm listening to the Will Smith audio book at the moment because he's just released an autobiography.
Yeah.
The first thing he talks about is like how he was taught by his dad to lay a wall, like how to build a wall, physically build a wall. It's like, why do I need to know this? And then it got to a point where after about a year of building this wall, he was like, the reason you're getting frustrated is because you're looking at the wall. You're thinking about the wall. Think about the brick.
Yeah.
Like, and it's like, as super hippie trippy as it sounds, it is true. It's like just that little bit every day. Yeah. Then before you know it, you're like, oh, I know how to do this. That's really weird. And that's kind of how I saw the book, was like, well, as long as I make a start on it,
that's it.
Don't put any deadline on myself and
don't
kind of
think
kept
about
it
the
quiet.
Wall, think about the brick. Yeah,
exactly.
That's a really great mantra to have, I think.
It is.
Yeah.
Thank you, Will. Thank you, Will. Thank you, Mr. Smith. If you're listening, Will, thank you.
But you know what, that relates to guitar playing in so many ways, right? Because, and especially what you've described, Richard, which is this frustration point or this stuck in a rut bit, and then trying to become more consciously competent, as you described, Matt. You know, everyone's on that journey, and we've had guests on the show as well, guitar teachers, and things that have really stuck in my mind from the conversations with them is exactly what you're describing, which is, you know, we're all on our individual journey. We all want to be able to think that we've mastered this instrument and we've unlocked it, but you'll never reach that end destination. And don't kind of get frustrated and judge yourself on what others are doing or where you think you should be. Just keep adding one brick every week if you can. And Matt and I constantly challenge each other on the podcast with a little thing every week. It's like, what's the one little thing you're going to try and do on the guitar next week, just to push yourself a little bit forward. Yeah. It doesn't have to be like, right, I'm going to be able to play For the Love of God note for note, you know, from not knowing it at all. It's just like, well, I'm just going to try and listen to this bit and figure out what's going on there, because that passage or phrase has always eluded me in a particular song, and I'm just going to have a go at that, or I'm just going to try and use a bit more of this theory I've been learning and just try and find a way to make it musical or whatever. We're always talking about that on the show, right? Just adding that, and we're going to steal this analogy now from Will via you, which is just adding that one more brick every time you pick up the instrument.
I mean, I naturally go down the hippie trippy route with all this kind of stuff, because there are so many parallels. I think a lot of guitar players who've been playing a long time, not to sound too preachy about it, but I think a lot of guitar players do find a lot of analogies in life with their guitar playing. There's going to be times in life where you struggle, and it's like you find a solution, you find a way through it. Like teaching you to have patience in life. Like everything's not going to go your way when you want it to go your way. Guitar playing is a very good reminder of that, to go enjoy the process. Don't worry about the destination. You will get there. Just enjoy the process. And that's my hippie trippy talk done for the day.
I don't think that's too hippie trippy. I think that's good sound advice. There's a piece that we learned that I learned the other day that I was telling Matt about, and now I've learned the piece. I almost care less about the fact that I've learnt the piece, even though it was on the to-do list for many years. Yeah. The thing that I really enjoyed was the days of sitting down and breaking it down and trying to build up to that point. And it was more about, actually, retrospectively now, I thought I would get the accomplishment from learning the piece. But I don't really want to play it anymore. But what I do want to do is go through that experience and reward loop of making that incremental progress every day, because that was actually the most fun bit.
It's finding that flow, that creative flow, when you're really passionate about something, you're just immersed in it. I think I live for that. I actively search that out. Like, I've done it so many, I think we've all done it in our life. Like, there was a time when I wanted to learn, I don't know, like mentioning Bohemian Rhapsody again. Once I could play that song all the way through, that was my big goal as a diehard Queen fan, was to play that song start to finish with the record. Yeah. And then all of a sudden the goalposts shift and you go, well, cool, I'll find another song to learn now. And it was like, literally, like you say, within minutes of doing it, I'm like, cool, let's do it with something new. And it is. And again, you can equate that to life as well. It's taking the time to almost be grateful for what you've accomplished, but at the same time, knowing there's more.
Yeah.
And it's finding that balance that I've always struggled with, not just in guitar playing, but in life. It's like, well, be happy for where I am, but I'm aiming for that.
Yeah,
you know
there's a lot to be said, isn't there, for being in a constant state of learning for learning's sake and understanding
definitely
how good it feels to be in a state of kind of self-improvement rather than, for the sake of learning the thing you're learning.
I've done that one too many times. 8-finger tapping. Yeah.
Oh, no way.
Do you know what I mean? I remember being at ACM going like, what? How come everybody else seems to be able to sweep pick and I can't? I didn't even know what sweep picking was, despite being a Steve Vai fan. But for context reasons, 2003, no YouTube. So unless you owned a VHS or a DVD, you didn't know how it was played. Yeah. like you didn't see it played in front of you. So when I got to ACM, I was like, oh, that's what he's doing. Why am I trying to alternate pick it as fast as I can and then being surprised that I can't play up to speed? I just thought Steve Vai was this god that nobody could play as fast as that. And I was like, oh, that's because I've been doing it wrong. But because when you become aware of those things, and I became it was one of those things where sweep picking for me was like, now this is the measure of a great guitar player. When you can sweep pick, I'll be on a whole new level of guitar player. Then I learned how to sweep pick. Devoted months, if not years of my life to it. And then when you can do it, you go, don't really use it now. You know what I mean? It's like that really weird thing. It's almost like, I don't know. I just find the goalpost shifting and like 8-finger tapping. I think I tried that for about a month of my life and then went, I have never in my life needed to 8-finger tap. What a waste of practice time that was. And I think it's different for everybody. You just need to know what you want to do as a guitar player, which again constantly evolves.
Yeah.
And pursue the thing you are passionate about at that point in time, and you will naturally improve.
Wow, what wise words.
Absolutely, very wise. That's something that it's almost painful that it takes so long to come to that conclusion when you're a guitarist, because nobody comes to that conclusion 6 weeks after first picking up the guitar. It's always about 10 years afterwards when you've got to a certain stage and you go, oh, well, yeah, I should have realized that. But I wanted to go back to ACM because obviously we were there at the same time. That's when we first met. And I remember you being, a very dedicated student. You clearly worked hard. Were you driven by an enthusiasm the whole time, or did you work hard to develop a discipline in your studying as well? Or, was it hard for you during those years?
That's a really good question, because like anything, there's things like when I was doing like my GCSEs and my A-levels, there are certain subjects where it was like, I just enjoy doing this. And I just naturally spent more time on those. But other subjects that you kind of had to do where I was like, there was even subjects I was good at, but wasn't passionate about. So I kind of kept the time revising for those bits kind of to an absolute minimum. And when I was at ACM, I just found it was that first time in my life not to go too emotional with this, but it was the first time in my life where I was like outside of my own hometown. All of a sudden, I'm now in a school surrounded by like-minded people, not just people who happen to live in the same town as me. And we're all in this together because we all just live in the same town. We're all by default go to the same school. Now it was like, now I'm surrounded by people who don't think I'm weird for wanting to play guitar all day, every day. Yeah. Like I'd be at parties wanting to talk about the intricacies of Beatles and Queen and Metallica. And people are going, are you all right? Like, just because I didn't want to, like, I don't know, be on the wreck with a bottle of White Lightning. I wanted to stay at home and play guitar. And not that I was kind of bullied for it, going, you're just weird. Why would you just want to sit and play guitar for hours? What's wrong with you? Whereas when I was at ACM, it was like people want to have conversations about Albert King and, you know, Joanne Shaw Taylor and all these kind of people. You're like, they're going, this is pretty cool. I'm not the weird one anymore. So I think it helped that I was around like-minded people and it wasn't seen as weird. And I wanted that. I was just passionate. I wanted to learn it. So I found that work ethic just came from being passionate about it. And I can understand it when you're in more of an academic thing, when you've got deadlines to meet, that could chip away at people's passion. You know, I'm sure some people spring to mind, Matt, I'm not going to name any names, but where you go, they were brilliant players, but all of a sudden they were met with all these deadlines and this workload. And it was like, you know what? I don't want to do that right now. I want to pursue this thing, and the academia side of thing is almost getting in the way of that. And I just went to ACM knowing, I'm here for a reason. I'm just going to knuckle down and do it. And to be honest with you, I just genuinely felt like one of the worst players there. And I think there was not to get too weird with it, but I think there was almost like, if I'm being honest, you're 18 years old trying to fit in with this new peer group. And all of a sudden feeling like the weakest one there was almost like, oh, crap, I really need to up my game. Like I say, I know shape 1 of a minor pentatonic, not knowing there was another 4. Going, oh, why does everybody else know there are 5 and I don't? Oh, no, I'm so far behind. So I think a bit of that work ethic came of, I just need to get to the same level as everybody else. But not to sound too big-headed here, but all of a sudden, what I thought everybody else knew was up here. So I was aiming for that. Everyone was actually here. But for some reason in my head, I had this thing of, everyone's way better than me. They all know these things. How come everyone can sweep pick already and knows what a dominant 9th chord is? I've never even heard of a 7th chord. I play power chords. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and I think that's what it was. I think in my head, I assumed everybody knew all this stuff already. And I was way behind. And then when I did get to that level, I was like, right. so it almost so it's like a chicken and the egg situation. Did the work ethic come first, or was the work ethic kind of born from almost competitiveness? I don't know. They kind of fed each other a little bit. Yeah.
That's interesting. You're driven by a situation that maybe only existed in your mind.
Yeah. Again, analogy for life. How many times have you had relationships with people where you think, actually, if we just talked this through and realised we were on the same page, but from different perspectives, it would have been a hell of a lot less dramatic and a lot of an easier conversation to have with people. And that's, I think, kind of what happened in my head. It was like, when I was at ACM, it was like, I need to be at this level to be, if I don't come out of this being able to be Steve Vai, I'm not good enough. And it was like, actually, that's really not the case at all.
What you actually came out as was Richard Shaw.
Exactly. In my way, disappointingly so. I was like, oh, right. But again, with age and maturity, I realised actually that wasn't a bad thing to come out as probably what I always was, but it was like blossomed. You know what I mean? And I didn't see it as a bad thing to be me. I was like, why don't I sound exactly like Brian May when I play Queen material? You know, why don't I sound like Larry Carlton when I try and play some Steely Dan stuff? It's like, that's because he's Larry Carlton and because he's Brian May. Yeah. I'm Richard Shaw.
This is turning into probably one of the most philosophical podcasts we've done. I'm loving
I was going to say, I'm sorry about that.
No, not at all, because I've been having these conversations, and I do this some of this coaching with people that I work with, And what you're referring to is what is often called like this imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Right. Where, and it happens at all levels, right? It happens with really senior people and seasoned people in their professions, careers, whatever discipline it is they're doing, being a guitar player or a CEO for a company or whatever, is, you keep going through these different positions and phases of your life and then thinking, am I ready for this? Am I right for this? That feeling you described at rocking up to ACM on day one. And long story short, when you unravel and unpick this constant imposter syndrome that we all have in our lives at various stages, it turns out that the secret and the way to get around it is just to be authentic and just be who you are and not try to compare yourselves to other people or emulate what they do, because everyone's got their own monkey on their back. Everyone's got their own imposter syndrome going on. And the way to cut through it all and ultimately, be better is just be yourself and recognize what your own strengths are and play to that. And it's
exactly,
but it's obviously easier said than done, right? It's way easier said than done, and we will go through that. But as you say, just hearing you say the thing I figured out is I am Richard Shaw and this is what I need to do. That so just like, well, there you go, you've nailed it. That's it. That is it.
It's weird. I remember reading this years ago where I think quote, I might be paraphrasing here, but it was something like comparison is the thief of joy.
Nice.
And
nice.
It's one of those things that really rang true with me because I was always trying to get to be like somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
As a guitar player, you can relate it to other areas in life as well. But as a guitar player, again, I come back to Steve Vai. I wanted to be like Steve Vai. And then it comes to a point where it's like, because I'm not Steve Vai at that level, that must mean I'm not a good player. And then all of a sudden it was like one of those realizations where it's like, no, I am a good player.
Yeah.
I'm just a different player.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, and then all of a sudden I kind of enjoyed the process even more than I already did. When you start turning from what we talked about earlier, where I was starting to play guitar just through sheer joy and sheer curiosity, you just naturally get better. There came a point, I'm not going to lie, towards the end of the ACM days where it's like, well, I can't improvise over jazz chord changes very well. Does this mean I'm an awful guitar player? Like, why don't I sound like Joe Pass when I try and navigate this? Because he's Joe Pass. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? It doesn't mean I'm a bad player because I can't do some certain things. Like, you start to realize what you can do. Obviously, always work on your weaknesses, but I became known for doing something that I was naturally kind of good at, and it's turned into a career for me where I was always focusing on what I couldn't do and thinking I wasn't a good player. Even when I first joined Cradle of Filth, I got the call. It's coming up to 8 years. It was December 13th, 2013, weirdly enough. I got the call. That's a lot of 13s.
It feels appropriate though.
It feels appropriate. I got the call. Yeah, December 13th. I just finished a gig with one of my old bands when I got a call from a mate of mine who is Cradle of Filth's sound guy, or he was at the time. And he just asked me, would I be willing to audition for the band? If I wasn't available, he's going to put my name in a hat. Basically, they're struggling to find people. They'd lined people up, but for some reason they hadn't sent their audition video in. And the deadline was coming up literally like a couple of days later. So he asked me if I'd be available. I was like, cool, yeah, just come on as a session guitar player, do one tour and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
I needless to say, I passed the audition and then it was like, right, cool. Here's the set list, learn this. This was like a few days before Christmas. I finally got the call. And so over that kind of holiday period, I'm sat there going, right, I need to learn how to play in a completely different style of music that I've never played in before.
Wow.
And then all of a sudden, as I'm learning the songs, I found myself getting incredibly frustrated. And I was, again, imposter syndrome took over. And I was very close to calling them up and saying, you've got the wrong guy.
Wow.
And I'm so glad I didn't, for obvious reasons.
Of course.
For very obvious reasons. I basically had to like shake myself out of it, to be honest with you, and be like, there's a reason they've asked me to do it. I've just got to crack on. I've just got to stop wallowing and going what I can't do and just find a way around this. And I learned how to do it. And weirdly enough, it didn't help that I was learning one of the hardest songs in their catalogue first. And then once I got that done, and I figured, because it was all learned by ear, it was like a 10-minute long song with all these time signature changes, tempo changes, trying to do it all by ear. And then the next song I learned was like one of their easiest ones. And I was like, oh, actually, I might be able to do this after all. All of a sudden, it got easier and easier and easier. And then I'm glad I didn't go with my knee-jerk reaction of learning that first song and going, I'm not good enough to do this. Because I did, almost convinced myself. And it's almost like I had to talk to myself in a more positive way of going, no, you can get this. You just need to prioritize what you do and just be more time efficient and spend more time on it, you know?
Think about the brick.
It's the brick again. Cheers, Will. It's that same old thing. I was learning this huge song, and it became more daunting and intimidating. What I had to do, I've got 75 minutes of music to learn.
Wow.
And I've got like 4 weeks to do it in and around family time, still teaching full time. Yeah. I think I was working on a musical at the same time as well. Wow. So it was like, I've got all this stuff, and it just became one of those things where, again, to use Will Smith's analogy, it was like, right, today I'm going to learn this riff.
Yeah.
Don't worry about the song. I'm going to do it one riff at a time. Within 4 weeks, I'd learned the entire material, and it was there under the fingers, ready for that first rehearsal.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's brilliant.
Every time something happens in my life where I think, oh God, it's getting overwhelming, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it, I always look back at that and go, well, you did that. Mm-hmm. So, and that was quite a high pressure stake there. Yeah. So you're about to do your first European tour, playing in front of like 2,000 to 3,000 people every night with people you've never met before.
Yeah.
You did that. So there's going to be other things in life that you will be able to do.
And for a bona fide British, extreme metal group that's been around for at that point, what, 20 odd years? They'd already been established for.
They'd be around for 20 years at that point. It's now 30 years, pretty much. And it was one of those things where it's like, I am feeling this pressure. But again, I just almost have to remember that it was almost like everything I'd learned on the guitar and especially at ACM had kind of funneled down to that moment. Everything we had learned was like, do you remember the lessons with like Eric Roach, where it's like, well, work on your ear and your sight reading. I'm thinking, why do I need to learn how to sight read? I'm a heavy metal guitar player. I'm never going to need to sight read. Weirdly enough, I have sight read. Obviously, before joining Cradle of Filth, all of a sudden I'm making a career playing musical theatre. And if you can't read,
you can't forget it.
You can't forget it. So I was like, that's why I learned how to read music. Got the Cradle of Filth job when I'm learning everything by ear. I was like, that's why I worked on my ear. Weirdly enough, I have had to sight read in a Cradle of Filth recording situation. So I'm really glad I learned how to sight read for that moment in time when I was in the studio.
Vindication.
It was stuff like that where you go, that's why they told us to pay attention. Right. That's why we had to learn. The number of times I've done like tribute bands and covers bands where we're doing Stevie Wonder songs and you're like, they're going, that's why I had to learn seventh chords. Stuff like that. As a rock player, well, I'm never going to need these things. I don't play jazz. Then all of a sudden I'm playing a hell of a lot of Stevie Wonder and Steely Dan going, well, I'm glad I learned the jazz stuff because now this seems relatively straightforward. Having learned that stuff. So it's all stuff like that. You never know what you're going to need until that moment is presented. Mm-hmm. I never knew I was going to be the guitar player in Cradle of Filth. I never would have thought that. I didn't even listen to Cradle of Filth, really. My brother was a massive fan, so I kind of knew them by default. But I would never have pictured that I would have been in a band like that. So I'm glad I learned those skills I did. And then the opportunity was presented. I was like, well, cheers, Eric. Thank you, Eric.
So what is it like being in Cradle of Filth? What is that like? Because it hasn't been that go and do a tour, be a session guitarist. And although you've kept your hand in with various other projects and the musical theatre and stuff, you are now, you've been in Cradle for a number of years. What is that like?
Obviously, it's very different now to how it was when I first joined the band. It was like when I first joined the band, it was like almost learn the parts, be a nice guy, just do that. You know what I mean? Just stay out of the way, do as you're told. Yeah. You're here for a reason kind of thing. And just that's how it was as the session guy. Just like many other situations I've been in, I'm paid to do a job. I'm going to do that job to the best of my ability and make it as pleasurable and not as dramatic as possible. I'm trying to think of a good word for that. But like, just try and be easygoing, do what's asked of me. And then when it was clear I was going to be a member and start writing my first album with the band, even then it was like, well, how do I write in this style? And everything was a massive learning curve. Like touring with people you've never met before, touring etiquette. Like what do you do on a tour bus? I've never been on a tour bus. How do you conduct a real sound check? Like what do I do? And that kind of is different from band to band, like trying to work with a band. But now I've been with that band for so long, you can almost second guess how people are going to react to things, which means in a weird way, you can push each other further because you know where the line is. When I was writing my first album with them, it was like I'm kind of still doing as I'm told. I'll write a song, this style. I'll keep it nice and safe. This is in the style of Cradle of Filth. I know what works for them. See what they think. Take their word as if they don't like something or if they do like something, that's the gospel truth. They know what's good for the band. As I was writing more and got to know them more, it's like, maybe we can push the boundaries out a little bit and I can kind of be more of who I am within this system.
Yeah.
And I can contribute more as not playing it safe. Let's try new things. And we were all like that, not just me. And I think it just made for better writing chemistry, better social chemistry. We just know how each other ticks. And you don't necessarily play it safe anymore. It's like when you go out like with your best friends on tour, you've known each other that long, you know where the line is. If someone's having a bad day, you know to leave them alone. You know when someone's on the cusp of going, they just need a hug. You know what I mean?
Or they're hungry or whatever.
You know, if you have a day off, you know who just wants to be left alone on a day off. There might be some, you know what I mean? It's little things like that you learn by just, life doesn't prepare you for that until you're in that situation. Yeah. So it has gotten easier in the sense that we know how each other works and how we like to write, how we like to be on tour. The working relationship almost gets easier as you go along, because it is like, instead of being seen as an employee fulfilling a role, it's become that thing. You're just making music with your mates again, but it's just on a different level.
Yeah.
So
that makes perfect sense.
When you join your first band, it's like when you're kids, it's like, cool, we need a bass player. Do we know any? No. Well, you play a bit of guitar. It's basically an easier version of a guitar. Like, you can play bass now. Which I know.
We've all been there.
Sorry, bass players. I genuinely don't believe that. I don't believe that. But you know, when you're young and you kind of have that mentality, it's like, now all of a sudden my bass playing mate is a bass player by default, but he never intended to be a bass player. And it's like kind of like that in a weird way. Like, you find new roles in the band. It's like, well, now in my pursuit of trying to get better as a songwriter, all of a sudden it's like, I'm not just writing guitar parts now, I'm writing orchestral parts. I'm thinking of drum beats. I'm kind of thinking of things in a different way. And it's constantly evolving. And it's the way it should be, I think.
Absolutely. So it sounds ideal that you've basically gone from, like you say, session, a contractor almost who's there to do a job, and now you're an integral part of the band, the process, the way it currently works. And I'm sure you never imagined when you first started with them that it would come to this, and it's fantastic.
I was literally employed to do 1 month with the band. A month-long tour of Europe. I had a contract that basically says, well done, you are hired for this month on the road. You will be paid this much. Thank you very much. Basically, when you've done that tour, it's like, go back to what you was doing and just put it on top of my CV, basically.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And then it was like literally the day after that tour finished, Danny sat me down and was like, okay, do you want to keep doing this? The guitar player that I technically filled in for isn't coming back. So do you want to start writing a new album with us? And then it was almost like being handed your dream. Like while I was on tour, it was almost like, well, I know the end's coming, so I'm going to milk it for all it's worth. I'll probably never play in audiences this big, playing this style of music ever again, because I hadn't played that style of music up to that point in my life. And I was like, well, this is a great experience. Thank you very much. And then all of a sudden it became my life and I was doing it full time. And so again, life threw that curveball at me. I was not expecting to be playing this style of music and writing this style of music and touring the world and seeing places that I could only dream of when I was a kid. So I'm incredibly fortunate.
But it's been through a process of work and dedication. It isn't just a chance thing, is it?
It was almost like I was practicing and working and taking every job under the sun, saying yes to every session gig ever. Just one, because at the end of the day, I just enjoyed it and I wanted to do it as much as possible. I still to this day see it as every session I take on with whoever band I'm working with, even within Cradle, we write a new song. It's a new experience every single time we do anything. We might go on tour in the States for the umpteenth time, but every tour is different. It's a new learning curve. Every show we play, every sound check we do, each bus journey from one, it's a different experience. Something happens that means you've got to deal with it and adapt in some kind of way. And that's
that keeps it fresh. That keeps it fresh and exciting, right? And,
exactly. It's still taking it one day at a time and just seeing it as all experience at the end of the day. As long as I'm enjoying what I'm doing, I'm going to stick with it. But if it comes a point where I don't enjoy it anymore, I'll go. It's as simple as that. But luckily, I still enjoy it.
Good.
Absolutely. Well, I've certainly enjoyed doing some of the research for this podcast. I obviously knew the name Cradle of Filth beforehand, had listened to a little bit in the past when I was really into my kind of heavier stuff. And then this was a great opportunity to listen again to some of the newer stuff. And I must say, the orchestration in it is, I mean, you see it on face value for what it is, and then you kind of start listening to it more and unpicking some of the layers in it. That video for Necromantic Fantasies, I can't stop watching. It's like an art piece. It's just it's epic. It's just epic.
It's a cool video. Like that guy, I'm not involved with the video side of things. It's kind of like Danny and the director sit down and discuss concepts and stuff, and then I just turn up on the day and go, oh, this set looks really cool.
This looks cool.
And, I wonder what this video is going to look like when it's done. And I see it kind of when it goes on, well, probably a couple of days before it goes online, I see the final thing, and you're like, that's amazing. And I wrote that song in the back of a van in Cardiff. And you just, it's like moments like that. We shot the music video on my birthday this year.
Right.
And which was kind of weird. It's like I'm spending my 36th birthday like on a set for a song I wrote, technically en route between Cardiff and Edinburgh, I want to say.
Wow.
Just stuck in a van for hours. I was like, well, I need to restring my guitar anyway, so I might as well do it here and make the most of the time, and then just start playing around. I was like, I've got a cool chord progression.
Yeah.
And then when I got to Scotland, started working on other parts. And then by the time we drove back from Scotland, I'd kind of written the music for the song.
That's brilliant.
And then moments like that, maybe it'll end up on an album. I don't know. I quite like it. And then next thing you know, hang on a minute, this is going to be a single and we're going to play it around the world like every night. And you're like, moments like that are not lost on me. Where you just go, that's just
how do you top that? That is like everybody listening to this podcast as an aspiring guitarist will listen to that and go, well, what do you do once you've done that? Because that's just like the biggest tick on the list ever, isn't it? Really?
I'll always remember the one thing. There's been a lot of moments in my career with Cradle of Filth where you just go, this is insane, especially like we played Main Stage Download Festival in 2018, and I'd been to that festival pretty much every year it's been on, being the local guy. I'm originally from Derbyshire, and we played the main stage in 2018, and that was incredible. That was insane. But we didn't play many songs that I'd written. It was more like a greatest hits, like the old school set. Let's play that. We haven't got long. Let's just play an old school set. I remember when we did my first tour of South America. I remember especially Rio de Janeiro, and we played a few songs that I'd written in my living room, Derbyshire, and they're singing the guitar riff back at me. I'm not going to lie, that was a moment where you go, don't cry on stage. It doesn't look very good. I mean, it might add to the makeup and all that. Yeah. But I was there. Literally, we started playing the song. When Danny introduced the song, the crowd erupted, which I was like, wow, we've not even played it yet. And they already know the song. They're excited to hear a brand new song that I had written in my living room. And then all of a sudden you start the song and they're screaming the guitar riff back at you over the PA.
Wow.
And I was like, yeah, this is, there are no words. I'm still speechless when I think about it. And they were literally singing along with guitar riff all the way through the song.
Unbelievable.
Amazing. And it was like feeling like you're at Iron Maiden Rock in Rio, you know, we're like singing Fear of the Dark. They're doing it with one of my own songs. And it's insane. Absolutely.
It reminds me of I remember watching the the video, the live performance AC/DC did in it Buenos Aires or somewhere like that.
I think
they
so.
do Highway to Hell, and you can hear in the recording the crowd singing louder than the guitar, the riff. It must have been like that. I mean, even just to listen to that, and it's somebody else's song. It makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. So for you, that moment must have been, that'll be a lifelong cherished memory. I'm sure.
It was. If it all ended tomorrow and for some reason I couldn't play or had to leave the band or something, I'll always have moments like that where you go, you know what? I'm incredibly lucky. Not many people get to experience that. So fantastic. I know how lucky I am.
Well, look, let's before we wrap up, let's just geek out on guitar gear a little bit.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
Not at all. This is the bit I was looking forward to the most.
Here's another thing that I bet you never thought you'd be able to say, but I'm going to say it for you. You're a PRS endorsee.
Yeah, it still sounds weird to say out loud.
Yeah, super cool.
I was going to say it again. You're a Paul Reed Smith endorsee, which the significance of that isn't lost on me, because my memory of meeting you for the first time at ACM when we did the high diploma together was, it was the first time I'd ever seen a PRS. Was your PRS that you had then. And I remember you being particularly proud about the fact that you worked part-time as a teenager to save up enough money to go and buy that.
Yeah.
And I bet you still got that, I'm sure. Obviously.
It's still here. It's right there. I've still got my first two PRSs that I had at ACM. I had the first Santana SE that came out in 2001. And I had a part-time job working at the salad bar in Morrison's. And I literally... I saved all my money because that came out around the same time I started that job. And I was like, I've always wanted a PRS, but now there's an affordable option. So I was like, I'm going to basically save my money, and bought it myself as like an early Christmas present. Yeah. Literally didn't spend any of the money that I worked part-time for like 3 months to buy that guitar. And then a mate of mine who I went to school with, all of a sudden turned up to school with a proper core American PRS. I was like, oh my God, like how much do you get an hour? Yeah. And it was it worked. Bear in mind, he worked at Morrison's with me. Yeah. And I was like going, hang on a minute, you get paid more than I am, kind of thing. He was like, no, there's this magical thing called finance. And that was it. Game over. 16-year-old guitar player going, I can finally buy like the guitar of my dreams. Yeah. Which weirdly enough was the Gibson Les Paul. It was the guitar of my dreams. I was going to buy that. But I tried out about 20 Les Pauls and didn't like any of them, which was heartbreaking for me because I'd always wanted a Les Paul. I just didn't get on with them. And I'm still after the perfect Les Paul. I'm still after it. I know they exist, but they're always out of my price bracket. It seems when I do find them, I'm like, oh, of course, it's a 1969 Les Paul that costs like about as much as my house or whatever. You know, like, of course, that's the only one I get on with, of course. And that's when I got the core Custom 24 that I took with me to ACM, and it's because I did get it on finance and
and you've got more. You've got more guitars now, though. Obviously, you've got a range of PRSs. What's your go-to instrument at the moment? When you sit down and you teach or you noodle around, what do you pick up?
The one I teach with, I know for people listening, they're not going to see this, but this is a 1993 Custom 24, which I actually found on tour with Cradle of Filth. Found it in Saarbrücken in Germany. I think that's how you pronounce it. I just went in, we'd finished sound check, and I was just like, I'm just going to go for a walk around the town. And I found this secondhand guitar shop. And it's quite a heartbreaking story, really. I think I've said this story before on a couple of podcasts, but this guitar has got a certain magic to it that I cannot describe. I mean, all my PRSs are fantastic. They are incredible. And just for the record, I play all kinds of different guitars. It's just PRSs do what I need to do very, very, very well. Very reliable. Absolutely. You go on tour and the tuning stability is second to none. I've never known a guitar stay in tune as well as PRSs. Even my guitar tech is like, your guitar just never goes out of tune. And I'm like, I know, it's just because they're built so well. I remember we did one tour where we played like Jakarta after we'd played like one of the coldest days in San Francisco. Like 2 days later, we'd like flown, rested.
Extremes, like massive extremes, right?
And the other two guys' guitars who use a brand that I won't say just in case we get in trouble for what I'm about to say. Their guitars were going out of tune left, right, and centre. They were needing truss rod adjustments during the show. It was just insane how much from playing one show to another. He couldn't handle it. Like, I went to my guitar tech afterwards and I was like, I was surprised the guitar held up. Bear in mind, it was like 40-degree weather like we were playing in. And I was like, yeah, it held up really well. He says, do you know how many times I touched your truss rod, like in preparation for the gig? I went, no. He said, none.
Wow.
Didn't even need no adjustment. It just handled it really, really well.
Astounding.
But that's just a little on a tangent. But going back to this guitar, the 1993 PRS, it was a secondhand shop and it was going relatively cheap. And I tried it out and was like, oh, this is amazing. I already had a custom 24. So I was like, I didn't feel the need to get one. But there was something about this that was indescribable, really. Everybody who's played this guitar has said there's that, you know, you get that guitar that's got a certain mojo that you just can't find anywhere else. This has it. So when I'm not in Cradle of Filth, this is the guitar I use all the time for all my session work, all my recording stuff. When I'm in E standard, this is basically the guitar that's used.
It's beautiful.
Absolutely stunning.
But it belonged to a guy, and it's a really sad story, actually, but I'll try and keep it brief. There was a guy who was a session guitar player, a German guy, who basically moved to LA when he was young, became a session. I think he studied at like GIT or MIT, I'm not sure which one. But he studied there and ended up becoming like a top in-demand German session guy. He moved back to Germany and he was doing like world tours with some of Germany's biggest bands. And he basically bought this guitar brand new in LA. Like, he was like, I need a versatile guitar to do all the session work I'm going to do. I'll buy this PRS. And it was his number one guitar. And he took on all these tours around the world and it's in impeccable condition to say it's been a touring guitar.
It looks it, yeah.
But from the sounds of it, about 2 years after he bought it and he was becoming a really successful guitar player, he was on tour and he just passed away.
Oh, wow.
He went to bed on the tour bus and he didn't wake up.
Wow.
If you don't know why, it's not like he was hard partying, hard drinking, hard drugging kind of guy. From the sounds of it, he was totally teetotal. He just went to bed and that was it. He just didn't wake up. And bless him, his dad, 20 or 25 years later, I'm trying to get the timeline right, he had all of his son's guitars and 25 years later, he was like, I need closure. I can finally bring myself to sell these guitars. And he went in that guitar shop the morning I went there with about 7 guitars, basically changed with him. In the afternoon, I bought that guitar and the guy who sold it me told me the story. And I was like, do you have the guy's number? And we called him. Yeah. And the guy, bless him, I explained who I was. He had heard of the band. And I says, well, I've just bought your son's PRS and it's going to go on the road with me. Oh, and the guy, bless him, broke down crying. I'm well enough thinking about it because to talk to him, he basically said it's what his son always wanted was to see that, like, those guitars. He even talked about it going like, these guitars having a life beyond me. These are guitars that deserve to be played. And the PRS went on tour with me. And now I use it for all my session work, everything outside of Cradle of Filth, that's used for everything. Beautiful. So it's quite a sad story, but I like to think it's fulfilling its life that he always wanted it to do.
Exactly.
You know, it deserves to be played just because there's certain guitars that I think, especially like PRS, I know they're pricey guitars and all that, but any guitar that like has a certain value to it, people think, oh, you just got to stick it on a wall and that's it. Like, they deserve to be looked at and not played. And I'm like, no, there's music waiting to be born from these instruments. They have a story. That story needs to be continued, not just, there you go, what a great art piece I have.
So absolutely agree. I mean, just by the nature of you play differently when you pick up different instruments goes to show that those instruments bring something to what you're doing. It's not just something that comes out of you and the instrument's a tool. It's almost a relationship, isn't it, between you and, you know, the instrument itself. And,
exactly.
And what comes out is a combination of those two things. So I completely agree. You know, I mean, like when Joe Bonamassa goes out on the road with his 59s, I'm sure there's collectors all around the world going, what are you doing touring with a 59 Les Paul? But he's the same school of thought as you, which is there's music in these things and you know, it deserves to come out. You just have to facilitate it.
It's like, as we all know, like Greenie, like Kirk Hammett owns Greenie. And I'm sure there are people going, what are you doing? That's Gary Moore and Peter Green's guitar, and now for a lot of people probably see it as being like it's been ruined by playing Metallica songs. Whereas to me, I think that's the greatest thing ever. It's like that guitar's story isn't over yet.
Yeah.
Now, 3 of the most influential guitar players on the planet and 3 of the most influential guitar players in my guitar playing story have played the same guitar. And it's going on tour. It still has a life.
Yeah. And that Les Paul arguably hadn't seen enough wah-wah action.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Now we know it can do everything, you know? Like, it can handle everything. I think most people were just kind of worried. They're like, don't you dare replace those pickups with like EMG
Some EMGs in there.
Like, I think that was everyone's biggest worry.
That's just what it needed.
That's what it needed. Route out a battery compartment for the active pickups. Could you imagine the collectors?
Oh, God.
Yeah. But thankfully, he hasn't done that. He's literally left it exactly the same. From what I gather, it's not even been refretted.
Yeah.
Nothing. Wow. It's literally exactly how it was left from Gary Moore's possession.
Imagine playing that.
I've got a few friends of mine who are like guitar techs in bands who have happened to support Metallica, and they've all gone, there it is. They see it in the guitar rack and they're like, there it is. And literally either Kirk himself or Kirk's guitar tech, Justin, will go, well, do you want to have a go on it? Kirk's very much a believer yes, he owns that guitar. It's his guitar, but it's not his guitar.
Yeah, I know. Do
you know what I mean?
Completely.
He's very much of a believer going, no, Peter and Gary want this guitar played and by as many people on the planet as possible. This guitar deserves to be experienced by anybody who's in the vicinity of it.
It's kind of
so
like
he's
the
openly say, go on, play it.
Yeah, it's like he's the custodian of it almost, you know.
Pretty much, yeah.
Just like it's like a museum, you know, it's he owns the Mona Lisa, but everyone can come and see it, can't he?
Exactly. Yeah. I've had a very similar experience that happened while I was on the US tour. I've got a friend of mine who's a producer friend of mine who does a lot of the Lost Symphony stuff that I've been doing, where I do a lot of guitar play. Like I did a song there's a song that came out on the last album where it was me, Kelly Kalariurik, who's also one of the Lost Symphony guitar players, but the other 3 guitar players were Nuno Betancourt, Marty Friedman, and Alex Skolnick. Now, Marty and Nuno especially are 2 of my all-time heroes. Even at ACM, I did a lecture about basically how good Nuno Betancourt is. And now I'm on a record with it.
That's crazy.
It was, again, one of those moments where you go, what the hell? But anyway, the producer who set all that up and I worked with, I went to visit him in Boston. And he now owns Jason Becker's guitar collection.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
And so he basically bought the famous Jason Becker Numbers guitar. He was like, here it is. Do you want to have a go on it? And for his YouTube channel, he took, which hopefully we'll all see it soon. There's basically footage of me playing Jason's guitar. And then he was like, do you want to see something even cooler? And he kept this a secret until very recently. He didn't want me to tell anyone, but now he's told the world. He went, do you want to have a go on what's in this case? And it said Gibson. It said Gibson.
Okay.
Les Paul. In Les Paul's handwriting, it said Les Paul. And I'm like, what's this? He opened it up. He says, this is Les Paul's Les Paul.
Wow. And now, I've seen the images.
Like, what?
It's gone,
And he says, this is the prototype Les Paul. Because Gibson had their prototype, but Les Paul wasn't happy with it. This is the Les Paul. And it's literally, you'd look at it, I played it, still plays brilliantly, but there's been wood chipped away at it. Les had literally just grabbed a chisel and went, no, I don't like that.
Wow.
And it's all left like that. Like, there's even sticky tape in Les Paul's handwriting on the volume controls, where it's like, I want the volume and the tone pot to have this capacitor in it. Change the capacitor. I don't know what it said on it exactly. I can't remember. But it was like, this is going to be changed. Like the notes are still left on it.
Yeah.
From what became the Les Paul. Like it originally, I think it was going to have 24 frets. So he went, no, not 24 frets, gouged out the bottom 2 frets, ripped them off, and the guitar has been left like that. Where it's like, and like gouged it out and physically moved the pickup closer to the neck. So all the wood has been removed from either side of the pickup to allow the pickup to move. And he did all that himself. And it's like, that is the guitar.
That's patient zero.
That spawned that's ground zero for basically electric guitar as we know it, is that guitar.
Wow.
And I got to play it.
What did you play? Let me guess. Enter Sandman?
I play... I played Smoke on the Water, Stairway to Heaven. No, I can't remember what I played. I think I just noodled something, like just played around with it, just going, what do you play? I think I just improvised something in B minor or whatever, and was just like, I just need to hear what this note sounds like. I can't, whatever I play on it isn't going to do it justice. I just want to have that moment, so I played on it. And it was an incredibly well-playing guitar, and it sounded phenomenal.
Really?
Yeah, still to this day, it sounded phenomenal.
Oh,
yeah,
goodness.
And like I say, that is the Les Paul that all Les Pauls were based on.
Yeah.
But it just literally like the neck profile, it like shaved down himself, and like even the headstock was going to be a particular shape, and he chiseled away at it himself, and incredible. That's just guitar history, like one of the biggest pieces of guitar history I'll ever have the fortune of playing. It's
amazing.
Incredible. So hopefully you'll see that video soon when he edits the video and puts it out.
Incredible. Well, that's a perfect place, I think, to wrap up our chat today as well, because that's a beautiful story, and I'm looking forward to seeing that video. If you don't mind me asking, could you remind us and your listeners where they can find your book as well? Your new book that you've got.
It's available on Amazon, but it is available worldwide. You can get it on paperback and Kindle versions. And it should be available all wide as far as I'm aware. I've had a lot of students around the world say they've got their copy already. And people who aren't students in countries that Cradle of Filth have never even been to, they've shown me pictures of them with their copy of the book. So as far as I'm aware, it's available on Amazon worldwide on paperback and Kindle.
Fantastic. So go and look out for that.
Brilliant.
It's fretboard and songwriting theory for metalheads and other genres too, using the secret to unlock the fretboard and your songwriting potential.
I know it's a long title, but that's thanks to Amazon. All these books, I was like, they're like, give it a long title, then give it a long subtitle, because then it helps. And I was like, really? And like all the advice I got was like, yes, just make sure that happens, because basically the Amazon algorithm, if you're not worried about selling it anywhere else, you need to do whatever you want to do to get the Amazon algorithm to flare up. So they're like, basically the more words, the better. And I was like, really, this seems quite long. And like my proofreaders who work in like education were like, honestly, you'll be surprised how long these book titles can go on Amazon. That's quite a short title. I was like, oh, really? Okay. So, I know it's a bit of a mouthful, but yes, it is available on Amazon worldwide, paperback and Kindle formats.
Amazing. Well, congratulations to you, mate, for that. And
thank you.
Can't thank you enough. It's really great to see you again, Richard.
It's been great to see you, and Kieran, it's nice to meet you as well. I hope we stay in touch.
Lovely. Yeah, lovely to meet you too. I've had so many moments. You're a great storyteller, Richard. I hope you'll come back onto the podcast again soon. I know there's so much more we could talk to you about. I've had so many moments on this chat over this last hour, just where the hairs have stood up on my arms, and I've had tingles just listening to your stories. Honestly, the philosophy we've dug into, I know we've only just scratched the surface of some of the guitar gear and geeking out on that, and there's so many more questions I have for you about your rig and your setup and what makes a great live sound. So maybe you'd indulge us with another visit to the show in 2022.
Definitely.
If your diary would allow.
I've really enjoyed it, so let's do this again and we'll get more into the gear side of things.
Brilliant. Can't thank you enough, Richard. Thank you so much,
Thank you,
mate.
guys.
Have a cracking week. Merry Christmas to everyone
Merry Christmas
listening.
to you.
Yeah. And brilliant. All the best, guys. I'll speak to you soon.
Take care.
Cheers, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening, and thank you again to Richard Shaw for being such a gracious interviewee for the podcast. It was an absolute pleasure. We're definitely going to get him on again to talk about more things and to geek out more on guitar, and it's just such a pleasure to speak to him, and we'll definitely do it again in the future. Remember to come and like us on our social media pages, and come and have a look at our merchandise online. If you want to donate to the show, you can through Buy Me a Coffee. All the links to all that stuff are in the description to the podcast. Come and have a listen to us on YouTube as well. Anyway, that's enough from us this week. Again, have a wonderful Merry Christmas, and we will speak to you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.